You know why you're here, Mr. Wordsworth?
Yes, sir.
I'd ask you to speak up a little, if you will.
Yes, sir. I know why I am here.
You've been under investigation, Mr. Wordsworth, for the mandatory period of 1 year and 11 months. You're found to be obsolete. The purpose of this hearing is to make a finding in the matter and make a sentence accordingly. Do you understand that?
I understand that.
Your occupation, Mr. Wordsworth?
A radio talk show host.
What?
A radio talk show host, sir.
I'm told you've had counsel and been given orientation, Mr. Wordsworth, but I'm still not sure in my own mind that you understand the purpose of this hearing. The field investigators in your sector have classified you as obsolete. This finding carries with it serious implications. Do you understand that, Mr. Wordsworth? Now I ask you again, your occupation?
I am a radio talk show host. That is my occupation, my profession. If you people choose to call that obsolete...
Request clarification of the term? Yes, the term. Mr. Wordsworth, you people, you make reference to the state?
I make reference to the state.
And you persist in declaring your occupation, correct?
That is correct.
A minister. A minister would tell us that his function is that of preaching the word of God. And of course it follows that since the state has proven that there is no God, that would make the function of a minister somewhat academic as well.
There is a God.
You are in error, Mr. Wordsworth. There is no God. The state has proven that there is no God.
You cannot erase God with an edict.
You are obsolete, Mr. Wordsworth. You have no function, Mr. Wordsworth. You're an anachronism, like a ghost from another time.
I am nothing more than a reminder to you that you cannot destroy truth.
You're a bug, Mr. Wordsworth, a crawling insect, an ugly, misformed little creature who has no purpose here, no meaning.
I am a human being. I exist. And if I speak one thought out loud, that thought exists, even after I'm shoveled into my grave.
Delusions, Mr. Wordsworth. Delusions, the Bible, poetry, essays, all kinds, all of it opiate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. You have nothing but spindly limbs and a dream, and the state has no use for your kind.
Yeah? Well, we're gonna have to do something about that. This is RiverWestRadio.com, community-supported radio, streaming live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm your host. My name is Michael Wordsworth, and welcome to Breaking Down the News, the show that presents the news highlights of the week, but with a twist. Breaking Down the News is more concerned in bringing you information that wasn't covered on the front pages. Headlines you don't want to miss, because not listening could be dangerous to your freedom, liberty, and health. And good afternoon. Welcome. I am Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News on Monday, May 18th, Friday. We recently had the pleasure of interviewing the Grassroots Caravan. They're from Madison, Wisconsin. They bicycled down here, and it was delightful, simply delightful. You talk about some true Americans here, people that care. They are concerned enough to work from the grassroots level. Now the Grassroots Caravan, they're headed for Chicago. They're bicycling through Racine, Kenosha, and they should be there actually soon. They had their show here at the Public House on Locust. And we really want to offer them our prayers and support, actually, because what they're walking into is incredible. Incredible. The stage as it has been set for this particular summit is amazing. It's almost unprecedented, but every time I say it's unprecedented, there's always a new precedent. What they're walking into is police, security forces, military possibly. I mean, they're on standby. We've got armed guards, some with M16, full riot gear. Chicago ordered 3,000 new face shields. What are they getting ready for? I mean, there's been many protests. I attended the protest back in 2007 over the WTO. It was kind of intimidating. I mean, to give you a picture, you're downtown, you've got 30 guys in full riot gear standing at parade rest, looking straight ahead, not blinking. They've got their riot shields, their masks, tear gas ready. The crowd assembled along the lakefront. It was several hundred, maybe 400 or 500. It's hard to say. Could be 6. But right behind them during the whole protest, they had 3 or 4 big police paddy wagons, letting them know that they could possibly be hauled away at any second. Well, we're going to focus this Friday's show on the reason why the Grassroots Caravan and thousands, I mean, this is a big event of people will be protesting at this particular event that is Sunday, May 20th and 21st on Monday. So why are they protesting? Well, the government secretly prepared to evacuate Chicago during the NATO summit. This isn't why they are protesting, but this is an incident that shows us how potentially serious this particular event could be. Standby shelters ready for residents. For what? There's been protests before. The Chicago Business Insider, I believe, put out a news article stating how you should dress. How the protesters should dress? No. How the citizens and workers downtown should dress during the time of the protest. And why? They said, look, the protesters might identify you if you're wearing a business suit. They might attack you. They might put their hostilities out towards you. So dress down on that day. Blend in with the protesters. You know, that could backfire, though, because if you blend in too much and if problems do go down, you could be hauled away with them. And why? You were just an innocent bystander. You weren't protesting. You were going along to get along. Well, many innocent people are thrown into jails these days. It occurs all the time. We're going to go over a report later about a 12-year-old boy who was accidentally arrested. Tons of people these days. It seems like it's getting just worse and worse. So you have it's bad enough that they got all this riot and police gear, but you actually have this situation. This was leaked to CBS News, talking about a leaked directive issued to the Red Cross indicates that the federal government has prepared plans to evacuate Chicago during the NATO summit. An email sent to Red Cross volunteers in the Milwaukee area notes that the NATO summit in May could create unrest or another national security incident. Hey, there's been a lot of protests in this country. Why? Once again, we have misplaced the true danger here. The Arabs, anybody from any other nation, no terrorist group could possibly take away our freedom and liberty. That is something that only we can do. The government can't take it away, not if we stood strong and united. But we've been divided and conquered. We are a divided and conquered people. We don't see eye to eye. But the government sees that we're potentially, anybody that is informed and is concerned enough to protest this Sunday and Monday, they could be another national security incident. We're going to go into that more, just how absurd of a statement that is. It's reported that the American Red Cross in southeastern Wisconsin has been asked to place a number of shelters on standby in the event of evacuation of Chicago. Boy, you better have a lot of shelters ready to evacuate Chicago. I mean, what an insane... Do you know how long that would take? There's only so many corridors out there. And Chicago residents, what do you think of this idea? I mean, if anything happened on that scale where you would actually need to evacuate, it wouldn't be anything coming from the protesters. What could they do? Throw a couple... I mean, just worst case scenario. Say the protesters lit some cars on fire, started breaking windows downtown. Eventually they'd be arrested and detained. Fire would be put out. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. Why would you need to protest? When Thistle, one of the grassroots member of the grassroots Caravan members was on the interview last Wednesday. I proposed this to her, and she had a really good point to make about that. She suggested that this is quite possibly just fear-mongering to scare people away from protest, to deter them from doing what is their First Amendment right. I think she might be right. I mean, I cannot believe that there's actually going to be an event that would be so serious that we would need to evacuate Chicago. I mean, let's go over what possible situations would cause an evacuation of all of Chicago. Bioweapon terror release. Would that be done by the protesters? No. Would terrorists take advantage of this protest event to release a bioweapon or some sort of radiation dirty bomb? I don't know if they did. It wouldn't be very smart on their end because there's better targets. Disrupting our American political process at the grassroots street level with people protesting, showing their open defiance and support against this NATO summit. This is not something that the terrorists would really need to break up. It doesn't make much of a point. In fact, it would really just enrage the American people even further should such an event occur. Again, it was leaked to CBS News that the American Red Cross in southeastern Wisconsin has been asked to place a number of shelters on standby. Incredible. A spokesman for the Red Cross chapter told CBS, "Our direction has come from the city of Chicago and the Secret Service." Whoa, the Secret Service? You know what that means? If this is an event covered with Secret Service protection, which a NATO summit would be, I mean, technically it would be, the grounds and surrounding areas now fall under the rules of H.R. 347, a bill that was passed by Congress, that was passed by the President, Barack Obama. Well, that particular bill, H.R. 347, suggests and states that if you are in the vicinity causing a disruption, such as protesting, I mean, you could be as quiet as little church mouse going, "No NATO summit, no NATO summit. Get us out of the UN, get us out." This is typically what goes on at protests. It's not something to be alarmed. It's just people showing up. They're showing up with their solidarity in support, united against a common issue, such as these people have a right to be concerned. They're concerned that NATO is making decisions for our government, our country, that we have no say in. 2 weeks ago, residents were startled by urban warfare drills conducted in downtown Chicago on the authority of the OMEC, which is Chicago's Office of Emergency Management and Communication. Don't you just love, these organizations are set up to disrupt the protesters and possibly deal with them. But believe me, if you actually had an actual emergency, such as Katrina down in Louisiana, you would not get help from the federal government. They couldn't get water to the people for 3 freaking days. They had those people living, it's just the corruption, the rampant crime wasn't the people. It was the actual police and military. The police were caught and convicted now. Years later, they finally got convicted for shooting people and looting themselves. And the military, we have video footage on local Louisiana news going door to door in the high and dry areas where people of wealth actually had guns and weapons and food stored and water. They were ready. And what did our great government do? Went door to door taking their guns. This is no longer America, people. No longer. And now it appears that these exercises may be linked to the secret preparations. But what? Well, in addition, earlier this week, a number of Chicago area residents revealed that they, too, had been asked to leave their homes in preparation for major rioting. The residents received letters from management that reads, "We are strongly recommending that all residents find places to stay during the conference from May 18th through May 21st. Thistle must be right, because this is just completely insanity. Her idea that this is just fear-mongering, because when I read this article that they put out and going door to door, sending out memos, emails, announcing on the news that you should probably leave your homes because there could be major rioting. Immediately, the public registers that these protesters aren't good, decent people showing up to stand up for not just their rights, but the rights of all of us in America at this particular event. And that the residents, the weak-minded, media-believing people, God bless their souls, but they're stupid as sin, and it's ultimately going to cost them their liberty, their freedom, and then their life. As a corrupt government slowly takes over, of course, these people would perceive this news as these protesters are the threat, and the last thing I would want to do is go down and participate in something that seems so... I wanted to say un-American, but I'm sure people don't think of it in terms. Actually, this is the most American thing you can do. I mean, protesting. Okay. Well, the quote goes on from the CBS report that in the event of a riot or the potential of one nearing the building, all access doors will be locked, including the garage door. The letter that's sent out to the offices and the businesses in the area read, "For everyone's safety, we will be instructing anyone in the building to stay in his or her unit." It's for your safety. The fact that the American Red Cross in southeastern Wisconsin has been asked to place a number of shelters on standby in the event of evacuating Chicago dovetails with the reports earlier this year that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA, put out a request for contractors to construct temporary emergency camps inside the United States, which can be ready for occupancy within a 72-hour time period and used to house emergency responders as well as displaced citizens. This is in the event of economic collapse. The FEMA camps, I would like to think that they're not ready for this particular Chicago event, but maybe if they had to evacuate them, they'd just get you that could be another reason they're doing it. Cause a disruption. It would take a heck of a disruption to get everybody to evacuate Chicago. I mean, that would not be an easy job. If you've been to Chicago, it is packed block after block with high-rise condominiums and office buildings. I forgot the exact population of Chicago. I should know that off the top of my head. But it's like 10 times the size of Milwaukee, would be a fair estimate. 6 to 10 times the size of Milwaukee. And to evacuate them would take days. This is not it would disrupt everything. You talk about displaced citizens. What about the displaced economic growth that would not occur during this time of this displacement? Okay, well, the whole reason they're there this weekend, thousands from all over America. I mean, people are traveling here to protest NATO and this summit. There were going to be 2 summits there. The G8 meeting, I believe, was moved to Camp David because they just thought it would be too convenient to have both events there and all the protesters show up. I'm not sure why they separated those events. The future always provides us the hindsight, and we'll find out. But I'd like to help announce why this protest, in particular, this weekend in Chicago, is so important. It's against NATO, the North American Treaty that was started shortly after World War II with the European nations, UK, and some Czech republics are now part of it, and the United States. It was against the possible attack from the Soviets or maybe the Chinese or maybe both, and that's why it's held together for so long. But now we know that this thing was never disbanded after the Soviet threat. I mean, the wall came down, they had glasnost. The Cold War was over, but we still have NATO. It's kind of like recently when the government announced Osama bin Laden's dead. The terrorists have been foiled. There's no real threat anymore. Well, that doesn't stop the TSA, the Google searching our emails, FBI searching the HR 1955, the thought controlling bill, HR 347, the NDAA, which covers the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens. It doesn't end. Let's talk about NATO. Let's talk about why NATO is such a monster. and that these people are protesting. I'm going to take a short identification break here. It is Friday, May 18th, 2012, headed into the protest weekend down in Chicago. Amazing. I'm Michael Wordsworth. I'll be right back. You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. What has NATO ever done? I mean, what have they accomplished? Wondering why anyone would confront NATO's summit in Chicago this month? A look at some of its more well-known crimes might spark some indignation. Discretion of corpses, indiscriminate attacks, bombing of Allied troops, torture of prisoners, and unaccountable drone war. These are but a few of NATO's outrages in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen, and elsewhere. On March 20th, 2012, Pakistani lawmakers demanded an end to call to all NATO CIA drone strikes against their territory. As reported in the New York Times, Pakistan's Foreign Secretary Jalil Jilani said April 26, 2012, quote, "We consider drones illegal, counterproductive, and accordingly unacceptable." And he's right. On May 31st last year, Afghan President Hamid Karzai gave what he called his last warning against NATO's bombing of Afghani homes, saying, quote, "If they continue their attacks on our houses, history shows that Afghans do with trespassers and with occupiers the Afghan way." While bombing Libya last March, NATO refused to aid a group of 72 migrants adrift in the Mediterranean. Only 9 people on board survived. The refusal was condemned as criminals by the Council of Europe, a human rights watchdog. Oh, I'd like to remind you, too, that we have our phone lines are open this afternoon. You're free to call in at 414-935-2951. Please, if you're going down and protesting this weekend, tell us why. Put your support to the people. Again, that number, 414-935-2951. It's also at riverwestradio.com, just above the Ustream screen, and feel free to call in. We're going on. NATO. Why are they so bad? Well, I have a litany of reasons for today that I pulled all these news articles going way back, that when you read them together, you begin to see a bigger picture. You begin to see the very reason why these people are out there protesting this weekend. How about NATO jets bombed and rocketed a Pakistani military base for 2 hours? 2 hours. Now, some of you might not know, and some of you do, but Pakistan has bent over backwards to be the allies of the United States and Europe. They have, if it wasn't for them allowing our troops to be the staging ground area for Afghanistan and even Iraq, those missions wouldn't have been possible. The Pakistani people, the Pakistani government has tried to work with the U.S. government, but our current foreign diplomacy is deplorable, absolutely deplorable. We have for years now killed innocent people and taken their lives with our ridiculous, mindless drone weapons that fly about. Could you imagine here in America, you're at a wedding with your family, it's a beautiful day, and a mindless drone from another country is flying your skies and it identifies you as a threat. And in the middle of your wedding day, you watch all your guests and family gunned down by this mindless machine. Incredible, but it's true. And I know if it happened here in America, we would not stand for it, and the Pakistani people have every right to call for this to be stopped. And who's listening? NATO? Nope. The CIA? Nope. They continue on with the drones. It's as if we really want to make the Pakistanis mad. And you know why that's not such a good idea? Why it's not so good to push the Pakistanis against the wall? Let's not forget it's because of us that they obtained the nuclear bomb. That's right, in their war against India, somehow, some way, not only China, but Pakistan obtained the bomb. We forget about that. We forget that Israel has estimated 400 nukes of its own. They're not a weak, defenseless country. They're able to hold their own. But here we are, messing with Pakistan. You know what happened if, after a while, the public opinion was so distraught and revolted by America's drones, killing their innocent civilians, that some rogue group within their government actually did get a hold of that nuke and actually did set it off in some sort of desperate attempt? Wouldn't that just be the beginning of World War III? It's possible. It's possible, and it goes on because the American people, they sit at home not aware of these incidences. They don't realize that our foreign diplomacy is the reason for terrorists to even exist in the first place. America was once a beloved and loved, respected country for its Constitution and Bill of Rights, something that everybody could respect and get behind from all nations and creeds. Well, the NATO nefarious, hardcore push of awful foreign diplomacy through warfare continues. The British medical journal Lancet reported that the U.S.-led unprovoked 2003 bombing, invasion, and military takeover of Iraq, which NATO officially joined in 2004 in a training capacity, had resulted in over 665,000 civilian deaths by 2006. And 200,000 in the UN authorized in 1991 Desert Storm massacre led primarily by the U.S. with several NATO allies. On April 12, 1999, NATO attacked the railway bridge over the, I cannot pronounce this name, but it's the Gredlika Gorge, and the Junzna Morava River with 2 laser-guided bombs. At that time, a 5-car civilian passenger train was crossing the bridge and was hit by both bombs. A civilian passenger train was crossing the bridge at the exact moment these bombs went off. How unfortunate. I mean, it was a 2-for-1. NATO really got its bargain there for its bombs. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch accused NATO of violating binding laws that require distinction, discrimination, and proportionality. NATO rocketed the central studio of Radio Televizija TRS in Belgrade, the state-owned broadcasting corporation, on April 23, 1999, during the Kosovo War. 16 civilian employees of RTS were killed and 16 wounded when NATO destroyed the building with their bomb. Amnesty International reported that the building could not be considered military, that NATO had violated the prohibition on attacking civilian objects and had therefore committed a war crime. NATO commit a war crime all the time. All the time. They should be brought up at The Hague, just like George Bush can't go to Switzerland anymore because they threatened to arrest him for war crimes. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't matter how powerful you get in this world. If you aren't working for the New World Order, if you're not one of the 6,000 families actually running the planet, any one of them can be taken down. We're going to go over yet more sickening headlines that I pulled up from news sources showing NATO's unending crime spree. It is absolutely ghastly, and that's why I'm reading today. I don't mean to bring anybody down, but I want people to know why people are protesting NATO's summit this weekend in Chicago. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to breaking down the news. You're listening to River West Radio. This weekend, residents head down to Chicago. They're preparing to protest what they're walking into. It's a dangerous situation. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Let's go over their reasons for protesting. Here's a list of headlines chronicling NATO's crime spree. Quote, U.S. troops posed with body parts in Afghan bombers. Los Angeles Times, April 18th, 2012. Quote, drones at issue. Raids disrupt militants, but civilian deaths stir outrage. New York Times, March 18th, 2012. GI kills 16 Afghans, including 9 children in attack on homes. New York Times, March 12, 2012. NATO admits airstrike killed 8 young Afghans, but contends they were armed. New York Times. You know, as I'm reading this list detailing from the news, mainstream news, over the last year here, the crimes that NATO has committed, I'm reminded of Tokyo Rose. I just thought of that. When our troops were fighting in Vietnam, although they were tricked into fighting that unjust war, they themselves were our troops. And Tokyo Rose was a Viet Cong radio talk show person. I don't know if it's quite a talk show, but the point being is Tokyo Rose, if you were in the Vietnam War, you know who she was. She would always read this propaganda over the loudspeakers, over the radio station, the only radio stations they could get, however they could pick it up. And she would play music so that the GIs would have music in these remote locations, but at the same time, she'd interject propaganda saying, your war is pointless, and you need to give up, and you need to go home, and you're unjust. And, you know, she was right about a lot of that, but I am not trying to be today Tokyo Rose. I am not trying to bring down the American military. I support the troops. I was one of them. I did my time. I served my country. And there's a lot of members out there in the military who agree with not just me, but for any American that believes in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. We as military personnel took an oath to uphold, not to the president, not even really to the country, but to the Constitution of the United States. There's a reason for that. Hundreds of years, thousands of years, humanity's fought to break its hold from tyranny. And the Bill of Rights is an improvement on the Magna Carta, and that's the little contract between us and government that keeps everything at peace. So I'm going to continue listing off today NATO's crime spree, not as a Tokyo Rose, but to help let it sink into the American public, those listening out there, just how much this crime put out by NATO is so prevalent. NATO, quote, admits airstrike killed 8 young Afghans, but contends they were armed. Really? They were armed, but the plane flying over had to do an airstrike on the ground to get them. I don't see the threat. I mean, they're not allowed to have Second Amendment rights in Afghanistan? Well, they're not bound by our Constitution, and soon we won't be either. It is no laughing matter, but I laugh because it almost makes you want to cry. We've got video of U.S. Marines urinating on dead Taliban fighters. You know, whether the war is just or unjust, whether our occupation is founded or not in these foreign countries, there is no conduct that's ever approved by the military wherein we urinate on dead Taliban fighters. If it comes to that, I understand war and combat and battle, but there comes a point where if you lose your humanity and soul in the process, you've won nothing. You return back to the country a demoralized figure. And then your country ends up taking away your rights as what's happening today. Death benefits are being taken from the military personnel as they return. The FBI is putting out that they are the new big threat, disgruntled veterans. If you have PTSD, it's been determined that you shall not be allowed to have your Second Amendment rights. But that's the reason you were supposedly over there, because they hate our freedom and they want to destroy our American way. But they can't take away our Second Amendment rights. No Arab nation, no person in Iraq, no Muslim or Sunni could possibly break into Congress, take the Constitution and shred it up and then say, from this point on, we're putting our laws in place. That's what it would take. But it would not take just that. There's another way for this to happen, and that's for the American people to be ignorant, to stay asleep, to not get involved. I always say out there, if you can't get involved, if you're so broke, you can at least pay attention. But there is one thing that you can do aside from protesting or any other thing, and that is just hold firm in your stance that you will no longer believe the BS that they're shoveling us in the media and the government. You will no longer believe that our government has our interests in mind as they dictate their policies that take away our rights and slowly shovel us into the internment camps. That's right. NATO, I have a list here of so many articles. I don't think I'm going to read them all, but I just really, some of them begin to sound redundant after a while. But here, quote, American soldiers convicted of killing Afghan civilians for sport. It reminds me of when in Iraq we threw the puppy over the cliff. You know, I'm not trying to be a wussy wimp here. I'm saying it's just not becoming of a U.S. soldier to throw a puppy off a cliff. But more people got upset over that puppy than they did over hearing Afghan civilians killed for sport. Okay, imagine civilians running through the grass interspersed with the sand, and you have U.S. military troops with their little scopes shooting at them. Out in the open, they have nowhere to hide for sport. Does that enrage you? I bet you it doesn't enrage you as much as when I tell you this cute little adorable puppy in Iraq that was brought along with the troops was probably their mascot. Some mindless cretin grabbed it by the scruff of the neck. I mean, some people on the video thought the dog was fake. It wasn't fake. And he held that dog up and showed the camera and the look on that little puppy's eyes. And the next shot was this American soldier flinging the dog yelped, and you heard the crying of the dog slowly disappear as it fell over the cliff. And I'm sure it fell to its death. Does that get you? Because if that's what it takes, that's what I have to say. If you can't be disgusted by the death and murder of innocent human beings, maybe you'll care about the dog. It's all the same. I'm not saying that. Oh, just sometimes it's hard to say what I'm saying. The message is clear, but it is so. There are so many angles. There is so much to cover. I'm going to keep reading on this list. Here we go. Quote, Pakistan. U.S. drone strikes, kills brother of Taliban commander. You would think actually that might be a good one, except let's not forget, we work with some of the Taliban are actually working with us against the evil Taliban. It's kind of like today how the Al-Qaeda. Some of the Al-Qaeda are now holding Libya nicely and safely in NATO's hands because let's not forget the Queen of England owns 50% of BP, and BP's got some $40 billion in infrastructure for oil development and refinery down there. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Quote, Afghanistan officials systematically tortured detainees. Well, that's Afghanistan officials, but the UN report says, honestly, I don't know what that has to do with the NATO. I don't know why I put it in there, but, oh well. Afghanistani officials systematically torture their detainees. You know what I can make out of that? How, here in America, we're accepting torture. We have it at Guantanamo, Gitmo, and Guantanamo Bay. Has President Barack Obama turned 180 on the torture issue? No. Has John Woo been brought up in charges for his inhuman writing of the papers that somehow justified the legal, if not ethical, issue concerning torture, making it possible? Here we go. Cable implicates Americans in deaths of Iraqi civilians. Well, that's no news. I mean, we know that went on. Civilians die in a raid by Americans and Iraqis. Okay. Here, NATO strikes Libyan state TV transmitters. Well, that was on July 31st, 2011, actually. So what? NATO blew up some TV transmitters. Well, hey, again, what if there was some weird Middle Eastern Arab League that had drones and planes, and they actually maintained air superiority over our country, and they blew up our TV stations? Wouldn't that be pretty strange? Wouldn't that cause offense to us? Wouldn't we go, look, you guys got to stop this? Another quote, NATO admits raid probably killed 9 in Tripoli. U.S. expands its drone war to take on Somali militants. They're expanding their drone war to take on American militants. They've got some estimated 30,000 drones now, and quite recently, I believe it was in Denver, Colorado, it was reported that one of these drones already in the air almost collided with a passenger airliner. Incredible. I mean, this would have, I hate to say, had the plane been empty of all human beings and it crashed and there was no deaths as a result of this, it would have been an incident that would have caused awareness. I don't want anybody to die in a plane crash by drone, but I'm just saying, had it occurred, maybe Americans would have gone, wait a minute. Now, that's one drone. I don't know how many are up there right now, but they want thousands flying all over the country. For what? It's just amazing. Is this necessary? The New York Times itself reported on May 26, 2011, Libya effort is called violation of War Act. Here's one for the New York Times, May 12th. Raid on wrong house kills Afghan girl. Oh, honey, I'm sorry you had to die because our foreign diplomacy is... we have to kill people to get our point. We can't possibly talk to them or work with them. What you got to understand, little girl that died and her family, I am so sorry. I apologize. I shouldn't have to apologize, but I'm going to apologize on behalf of concerned Americans, people that do care. We are sorry that your innocent 12-year-old girl died. The raid was on the wrong house, but in our own country, they do drug raids all the time, and actually so many times they get the wrong house, it just doesn't even matter anymore, and we end up accidentally killing our own people. A lot of pets die, a lot of dogs end up dying over these raids. So I guess if we do it to our own people, it must be okay to do it to you. NATO accused of going too far with Libya strikes. Well, you can accuse them, but what does that matter? Barack Obama says he doesn't need approval from Congress for war actions. He just needed NATO's approval. Disposal of bin Laden's remains violated Islamic principles, clerics say. Well, also got rid of the evidence. I think the guy was on ice. Osama bin Laden has been dead for a long time. Osama been dead for a while. That's I can't prove that, but this guy was supposedly on dialysis, and they just kept him. Where could you hide? Where could you hide on this planet to get away from the CIA? If they were actually on you and they had a bounty on his head, it's amazing. And then out of nowhere, they go and send in this. They stage this assassination of Barack Obama, haul his body off, throw it overseas. You can't do an autopsy. You can't tell how long the thing's been there. If that ain't enough, quietly it's reported in the news. No disgust from Americans. Where are the Americans that support the troops? That the Navy SEALs team that actually allegedly assassinated Osama bin Laden had accidentally been in a position where a single man with a Stinger missile could bring down the Chinook helicopter that was carrying the Navy SEAL team responsible for the alleged assassination of Osama bin Laden for a while. Amazing. Amazing. I'm going to just blow through some of these. I mean, it's just, there's too many. The list goes on, and they're starting to get redundant. In June 2008, NATO bombers attacked a Pakistani paramilitary force called the Frontier Corps, killing 11 of its soldiers. When we get back, we're gonna turn the spotlight from the foreign diplomacy back into Chicago. It's going to be an incredible weekend. This down in Chicago, protesters are set to appear by the thousands in protest. We'll see what happens. The United States military, the Chicago police are all up in arms. Possible evacuation plans are on the drafting table. It's incredible. It's pandemonium. It's insane. I'm Michael Wordsworth. You're listening to Breaking Down the News.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
And we're back. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News, and we are following the protests to occur this weekend in Chicago. I'm going to lead out with this article from Infowars.com on May 18, 2012. Chicago cops disappear activists ahead of NATO War Council. What? Chicago cops disappear activists ahead of NATO War Council. When do we start disappearing people in America? Is that what the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, signed by Congress and President Obama to indefinitely detain American citizens without trial or jury? What happened to the right to due process? Well, police in the Windy City recently underscored the fact that the United States is now a police state, little different than the former Soviet Union or East Germany. It has been seen by video, on TV, and on the internet that the National Lawyers Guild spokesman Chris Hermes says Chicago cops broke down an apartment door and arrested activists without a warrant. What? This occurred in America? It did, Americans. Listen up closely, because this is the nightmare slowly unfolding. Such preemptive raids are a hallmark of national security events. And Sarah Galisimino with the NLG and the People's Law Office in a press release, quote, "The Chicago police and other law enforcement agencies should be aware that this behavior will not be tolerated and will result in real consequences from the city." The NLG press release stated that the National Lawyers Guild, the NLG, condemns a preemptive police raid that took place at approximately 11:30 p.m. Wednesday in the Bridgeport neighborhood. Thank God they condemned it. Every one of us should condemn this. And instances of harassment on the street in which Chicago police are unlawfully detaining, searching, and questioning NATO protesters. This is what they're headed into this weekend. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to bring you coverage next week. We're here Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 3:30 p.m. to 5 or 6. The Bridgeport raid was apparently conducted by the Organized Crime Division of the Chicago Police Department and resulted in as many as 8 arrests. 8 arrests of American citizens. No warrant. No due cause. And here they are detained for what? Well, according to witnesses in Bridgeport, police broke down a door to access a 6-unit apartment building near 32nd and Morgan Streets without a search warrant. Police entered an apartment with guns drawn and tackled one of the tenants to the floor in his kitchen. 2 tenants were handcuffed for more than 2 hours in their living room, while police searched for their apartment and a neighboring unit, repeatedly calling one of the tenants a quote-unquote commie faggot. This is not the becoming conduct of a professional law enforcement peace officer. Now, these warrants can be retroactive, and a search warrant produced 4 hours after police broke down into the apartment was missing a judge's signature, according to witnesses. Oh, a slight technicality. We can get that signature on. I mean, the warrant's retroactive anyhow. Among items, see, you know what isn't retroactive is if you break in and don't find any actual evidence for issuing a warrant. Why don't they compensate these people monetarily? I bet you that would slow things down, but the money, actually, the joke is, would come from our pockets, the American taxpayers, Democrat and Republican alike. Amazing. The NLG reports, and this is the National Lawyers Guild, which is actually on this case. The NLG reports police harassment and illegal searches of other anti-NATO activists in Chicago. They state that the NLG has received reports that at least 20 people have been arrested so far this week, and 2 people are still in custody, not including the Bridgeport residents who are still unaccounted for. What, they were disappeared? That's what the press release states. They're unaccounted for. In other words, the cops are disappearing enemies of the state, the same way that Stalin and Hitler did. Camps for political prisoners, a modern version of Stalin's gulags. Stand ready now in America for re-education of political heretics. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News. Back in a moment.
Hello.
I'm Michael Wordsworth. Welcome back to Breaking Down the News. The recent UN call for a ceasefire in Syria was simply a ruse enabling the West to rearm al-Qaeda. Even the Washington Post is now openly touting Washington, D.C. and Hillary Clinton's support for al-Qaeda in Syria. Speaking from a mainstream consensus reality perspective, if this is now the case, what was the point of the 10-year war on terror? Syrian rebels get influx of arms with Gulf neighbors' money. U.S. coordinates these efforts to arm the Syrian rebels. This is from an article by Karen D. Young and Liz Sly, published May 15th. From the Washington Post. Syrian rebels battling the regime of President Bashar al-Assad have begun receiving significantly more and better weapons in recent weeks. An effort paid by Persian Gulf nations and coordinated in part by the United States, according to opposition activists and U.S. foreign officials. U.S. and foreign officials. Oh, if you're an official, it must be official. Whatever you say, whatever you do, we should just blindly listen to you. You're an official. Well, the Obama administration officials emphasized that the United States is neither supplying nor funding the lethal material, which includes anti-tank weaponry. Instead, they said, the administration has expanded contacts with opposition military forces to provide the Gulf nations with assessments of rebel credibility and command and control infrastructure. A look at the Syrian uprising 1 year later. Thousands of Syrians have died, and President Bashar al-Assad remains in power, despite numerous calls by the international community for him to step down. Well, thousands of Syrians have died, but it was not necessarily Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria, that was responsible, nor were it the people that support him. In fact, witnesses account that it was foreign assassins shooting with sniper rifles from the rooftops that took out these protesting citizens. These protesters from a small town. But here, this article by the Washington Post is saying that thousands have died and Assad remains in power. The connection possibly that he's responsible. Maybe you should not like him. Maybe it's justified that once again we go into a foreign country, a sovereign nation, and enforce our will militarily. There are no boots on the ground, but there are UN inspectors, and it has been reported, confirmed by eyewitnesses on video, that the UN inspectors with their little blue helmets riding around in their UN vehicles are accompanied by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda members wearing the black Al-Qaeda armband. Sounds strange to me, but it shouldn't. Al-Qaeda's working for us in Libya. We didn't put boots on the ground. We gave Al-Qaeda a job. We funded them through NATO, supported them, and took over Tripoli. But here, in the same way, the same vein, America's faulted foreign policy has turned their targeted sights on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to convince you through the media that we need to take him down, that he's responsible. Because, why? Numerous calls by the international community for him to step down. Wait, hold on a second here. We have to interrupt this because we have to make a point. As far as I can tell, why should Assad step down? Because of what? Because of the international community thinks he should? Under that same pretense, do they think Bush should have stepped down when he invaded Iraq? And he invaded Iraq stating that they had WMDs. There were no WMDs. That's well known now. Even your most blinded, deaf, ignorant moron in America that doesn't even hear the news knows there were no WMDs. Do they know now that Bashar al-Assad wasn't killing his own people? Should Obama step down for all the drone strikes of innocent civilians in Pakistan? Is the international community calling for that? No. What exactly is the international community charging Assad with that he should step down? From what I can tell, all he is guilty of is not being popular with the international community. I'm reading this article because it is a mainstream article from the Washington Post admitting that the U.S. is backing the overthrow of Assad. Right or wrong, State Department officials admit they are helping to overthrow the leader of a sovereign nation. The U.S. and NATO does it so much now. Saddam, Gaddafi, it's no big deal anymore. Let me continue reading this article, and you'll see my point. Said a senior State Department official. Another official from the State Department. One of several U.S. and foreign government officials who discussed the evolving effort on the condition of anonymity. Quote, said he, "We are increasing our non-lethal assistance to the Syrian opposition, and we continue to coordinate our efforts with friends and allies in the region and beyond in order to have the biggest impact on what we are collectively doing." Which is what? What are you collectively doing? Are you spreading freedom and democracy through the Middle East, because if that's what you believe out there, America, if you believe the mainstream propaganda that we're bringing freedom to the world, you're mistaken. And that mistake is going to cost not just you, but your family, their health, their liberty, their freedom. The U.S. contacts with the rebel military and information sharing with Gulf nations marks a shift in Obama administration policies as hopes dim for a political solution to the Syrian crisis. Many officials now consider an expanding military confrontation to be inevitable. Material is being stockpiled in Damascus and in Idlib near the Turkish border, and in Zambandani on the Lebanese border. Opposition activists who 2 months ago said that the rebels were running out of ammunition said this week that the flow of weapons, most still bought back on the black market in neighboring countries or from elements of the Syrian military, has significantly increased after a decision by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other Gulf states to provide millions of dollars in funding each month. Syria's Muslim Brotherhood also said it has opened its own supply channel to the rebels. Syria's own Muslim Brotherhood has opened its own supply channel to the rebels, using resources from wealthy private individuals and money from Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar. This was said by Molam al-Drobi, a member of the Brotherhood's executive committee. The new supplies reversed months of setbacks for the rebels that forced them to withdraw from their stronghold in Baba Amrain, neighborhood of Homs, and many other areas in Idlib and elsewhere. Quote, large shipments have gotten through, another opposition figure said. Some areas are loaded with weapons. The effect of the new arms appeared evident in Monday's clash between opposition and government forces over control of the rebel-held city of Rastan near Homs. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said rebel forces who overran a government base had killed 23 Syrian soldiers. Administration officials also held talks in Washington this week with a delegation of Kurds from sparsely populated eastern Syria, where little violence in itself has occurred. The talks included discussion of what one U.S. official said remained the theoretical possibility of opening a second front against Assad's forces that would compel him to remove and move resources from the West. A second front in Syria. The first front is hard to say that it's a front. It's more of a media portrayal of actual opposition against President Assad. It's amazing, America. It's time to wake up. It's time to listen. It's time to take note. We're going to announce also real soon here the exact time. Apparently there is a protest taking place Saturday, today at Washington Park. If those, I just got that word in. If those of you have attended that, good. I wish I would have been able to announce that. In any case, we thank the protesters going down to Chicago. May your voices be heard. We're behind you. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
In this next segment, we turn to Big Pharma and the psychiatric establishment drugged up of our children. I'm Michael Wordsworth. The number to call in is 414-935-2951. Please call, agree, disagree, show your support for the people in Chicago down there. Let's hear it from some people. We turn our attention now from foreign policy and domestic policy to the big pharma business. Pharmaceuticals, billions made each year off of misdiagnosed patients, and the psychiatric establishment won't leave just the adult patients alone. No, from this report by Alternet on May 17th from Martha Rosenberg, she says they're drugging up our kids. And she's right. Pediatric psychopharmacology is a billion dollar business that sustains pharma and pharma investors on Wall Street. In a book called Psychiatry Land, I apologize. In a book called Psychiatry Land, psychiatrist Philip Sienikin recounts reading a scientific article in which it was debated whether a 3-year-old girl who ran out into traffic had oppositional defiant disorder or bipolar disorder. I guess it really doesn't matter. She ran out into traffic. But it's important that we diagnose these cases. The bipolar disorder, marked by grandiose delusions that she was special and cars could not harm her. Well, if that's the case, then America's special, and we won't be harmed by losing our civil rights and our liberties. It'll be okay. But this little girl, how did the once modest medical specialty of child psychiatry become the aggressive pediatric psychopharmacology that finds ADHD, pediatric conduct disorder, depression, bipolar disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, mood disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, mixed manias? The list goes on. I mean, they've got an order for everything. They can diagnose any human condition these days as some disorder. Well, if you're angry, if you're depressed, if you're slowly losing hope, I say you have a reason. Sounds to me like you haven't lost your humanity. You still have a soul left. This is the natural response. Depressions, recessions are depressing when you don't have a job and you're losing your home. It was reported in an article recently that a couple recently killed themselves when what was it, JP Morgan, the bank, fraudulently, what was it?
Bank of America.
Bank of America, thank you, ma'am. Bank of America fraudulently took their home. It was too late by the time the signature was found to not even be correct, that the whole thing was illegitimate. The couple had lost their homes, and as sad as it is, the man took his life. I'm not sure if the woman took her life, but
There's 1,200 suicides so far. Over this.
ma'am, Karen, what's your last name?
Brooks.
Karen Brooks is here with us. She just brought us this important announcement. And she had the details. It's amazing. She just said to me that 1,200 people have committed suicide in America since the 2008 collapse of the housing market.
No, actually, it's even less than that. Just this past year for foreclosures.
Just this past year.
For foreclosures.
All right, this just in from Karen Brooks. Just this past year, 1,200 people have committed suicide over foreclosures. Well, she has another special announcement Saturday, May 19th at 2012 in the Washington Park Band Shell. The Band Shell is on the northern west end of the park. You'll find it right along Lloyd, I believe, or Washington Boulevard, right along Washington Boulevard, which is right around 40th and Lisbon, but it's actually a little more south than that. It's between North Avenue, Washington Boulevard, right around 40th. And Rebuild the Dream is the event. Recall, refund, rebuild, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Karen would like to see you there. I'd like to see you there. Let's show up and support. Van Jones, Congressional Representative Moore, LG Camp, and Jason X. Lee Camp and Jason X will also be there to show their support, as well as will be political satirist Lee Camp. That would be interesting. I'd love to get a recording of that. We'll be here at River West Radio Saturday. Hey, I guess I will be able to get archived audio or hear them live Saturday, this May 19th, which is tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'm not on the air, but he is, and this will be great. I want to hear this. Political satirist Lee Camp should be good. And later that evening, he will be in Madison, Wisconsin at the Recall Walker fundraiser. All right, you can hear Lee Camp tomorrow here at 3 p.m. and later in Madison, Wisconsin at the Recall Walker fundraiser. Karen, thank you for that. We appreciate the support. Look forward to talking to you again, actually. Seem to be a very well-informed and very active person. God bless you. We need Americans like you, and I mean that. We need Americans like you. Ordinary people standing on the shoulders of giants. Isn't it amazing how suddenly you go from insignificant to, I'm making a difference? I mean, Karen, you don't believe the lie, do you?
No, absolutely not. No.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. I'm going to get back to talking about how the big pharma here is drugging up our kids. Every problem you got, Karen, maybe your political activism is a disorder. Maybe you should be taxed more and there should be more foreclosures, and you shouldn't complain that the jobs aren't there. You shouldn't complain that the Democrats and Republicans are juggling the balls in the air saying, oh, it's their fault, we can't balance the budget.
There's not enough Soma in the world.
Karen said there's not enough Soma, which is actually a reference to the book Brave New World, where they actively... actually, you know what today's modern version of Soma? It's free and it's in the water. It's called sodium fluoride. That's the brand name, but it's actually hexafluorosilicate. It was used by the Nazis, used by the Russians to subdue the minds of the people.
It's the main ingredient in Prozac.
It is the main ingredient in Prozac, without a doubt. Karen, I should have you on sometime. It would be great. It absolutely would. Please get back to me. Take care. She's got important things to do. We're going to let her go. That was Karen. All right. Well, here we continue our coverage. It's amazing. Big Pharma drugging up our children. Hey, the military is drugged up now. They can't handle it. Well, who couldn't handle 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tours of duty? Being away from your friends and family. I think you would get a little depressed, and at some point over there, you'd have some cause for post-traumatic stress disorder. Are medications what we need? Is it wise to medicate the drugs? Use these drugs to make our soldiers confused in the head? They have weapons. They have missions. Can they do it on drugs? Well, it's not just the military being drugged up. It's not just adults here in America. It's our children. It's gotten so bad that AstraZeneca, whose controversial Seroquel still makes $5.3 billion a year, though it is no longer new, now conducts payer excellence academies to teach sales reps to sell insurers and state health care systems on its latest drugs. No wonder pharma is finding love by prescribing drugs to the nation's youngest and oldest patients, who are often behavior problems to their caregivers and who make few of their own drug decisions, and who are often on government health plans. Quote, children are known to be compliant patients, and that makes them a highly desirable market for drugs, says former pharma rep Gwen Olson, author of Confessions of a Prescription Drug Pusher. That's got to be a good book. Confessions of a Prescription Drug Pusher. She quotes, children are forced by school personnel to take their drugs. They are forced by their parents to take their drugs. And they are forced by their doctor to take their drugs. So, children are the ideal patient type because they represent refilled prescription compliance and longevity. In other words, they will be lifelong patients and repeat customers for pharma. And that's true because some of them serotonin uptake inhibitors, I believe, what was that one, Pfizer X? There is a few of those serotonin uptake inhibitors that they prescribe for mental disorders that once you're on them, you cannot get off of them. I've had friends that have reported to me electric stinging pains like they have never felt before when they tried to get off these drugs. Addictive drugs sold by big pharmaceutical companies sounds like a recipe for profits, but there's a price to be paid. We pay a price for all of this, America. Externalized costs, not just at the gas pump, not just in pollution that's dumped overseas, as opposed to here in America where we actually have EPA regulations. It's amazing. Just as it used to be said in obstetric circles, in circles where obstetricians would talk amongst themselves, they would say, once a cesarean, always a cesarean. It's also true that once a pediatric psychiatric patient, always a pediatric psychic patient. Few indeed are kids who start out diagnosed and treated for ADHD, bipolar disorder, and other psychopathologies. Few are who end up on no drugs. The number's grown. I've seen it in my own lifetime. As a child, they didn't put me on drugs. They had them back in those days. One psychiatrist recommended it at one point. Fortunately, my parents said no. I now see a new generation of kids that grew up on these drugs, and it's disturbing. Even if they outgrow their original diagnosis, a big if, with a mental history that follows them, the side effects from years of psychoactive drugs and their physical health on mental, social, and emotional development take their toll. Even children on allergy and asthma drugs, which are promoted for kids as young as age 1, are now known to develop psychiatric side effects according to emerging research. Kids who start out with psychiatric diagnoses are not only lifers, they are expensive lifers, usually shuttled into government programs that will pay for psychiatric drug cocktails that can approach $2,000 a month. I have a hard time just keeping dental bills and food on the table, and yet I don't need a $2,000 a month psych bill. But many Americans are paying $6,000, $8,000, $1,000, $2,000 a month to be doped up by cheap drugs that don't work. In fact, it says right on the labels, these antidepressants are known to cause suicide and depression. Are we really that stupid? Apparently we are. On this particular issue, we continue to be brainwashed in America. We think that they've got a pill for everything, and they don't. Not all medical professionals agree with slapdash cocktails. Panelists at the 2010 American Psychiatric Association meeting assailed pharma for such seat-of-the-pants drug combinations and called the industry nothing but a marketing organization. A marketing organization. In a symposium about comparative drug effectiveness, a Canadian doctor castigated the FDA's comparative drug effectiveness. Jing Zhang, who had served as a panelist at the symposium for his agency's approval of drugs for competitive reasons, that's his quote, competitive reasons, rather than for patient or health effectiveness. Hey, the medical industry, they don't cure anything with their drugs. If you get shot up or get in a car accident, American medical technology is top-notch, best in the world. But if you actually want to get cured of something, you've been waiting for decades for that to occur because none of our therapies, none of our drugs actually cure, only mask the symptoms. The body, it's found out by real scientists, that's what cures. We have an immune system. You have to keep nutrition in you, and you have to stay off the drugs because the drugs cause complications and problems. When 24 patients on combinations of Seroquel, Zyprexa, and other antipsychotics were reduced to only one drug, there was no worsening of symptoms or increased hospitalizations except in one case, and patients' waist circumferences and triglycerides improved. A large waist circumference and high levels of triglycerides, which are fat in the blood, heighten one's risk of developing diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. The drug cocktails were not working and were making patients worse by creating new medical problems. But pediatric psychopharmacology is a billion-dollar business that sustains pharma and their investors on Wall Street. The doctors, researchers, medical centers, clinical research organizations, medical journals, pharma's PR and ghostwriting firms, pharmacy benefit managers, these are all people involved they're on the dole. They're not on the welfare dole, they're on the big pharma dole. They're getting paid off, bought off, and making a living. Getting our kids hooked on cheap drugs. I don't want our kids on any drugs. But I especially don't want America complacently sitting by as they acquiesce to the brainwashing, doping up their kids, and reaching into their wallets to pay for it. I always thought that if Americans had to pay for some of the stupidity that they'd stop. That's what I thought. We'll see. We'll see. The father of pediatric psychopharmacology, a Harvard child psychiatrist, Joseph Biederman, is often called Joseph Risperdal Biederman because he is credited with ballooning the diagnosis of bipolar disorder in children by as much as 40-fold. Amazing job pushing the lie on the American people, and we believed him. In 2008, Biederman, a prolific author who has written 500 scientific articles and 70 book chapters, was investigated by Congress for allegedly accepting pharma money. He didn't disclose, and he agreed to suspend his industry-related activities. After a 3-year investigation, Harvard threw the book at Biederman and 2 other professors. They were required to refrain from all paid industry-sponsored outside activities for 1 year. 1 year, that's it. And comply with a 2-year monitoring period afterwards, during which they must obtain approval from the medical school and Massachusetts General Hospital before engaging in any paid activities. What a deterrent. They also faced a delay of consideration for promotion or advancement. When I come back, we're going to discuss common ingredients in soft drinks known to cause damage to brain function. It's not just the fluoride in your water. It's the soda water you drink. More in a minute. I'm Michael Wordsworth. The number to call in, 414-935-2951. This is Breaking Down the News.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
Good afternoon. We're back. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We turn our attention now to soda water. It's everywhere. It's in the stores. My God, look out. Maybe we should have a national security force to stop the soda water, but we don't. We don't. But there is a common ingredient in soft drinks that is causing damage to brain function. This report from D. Holt on Infowars.com, May 17th, 2012. The use of high fructose corn syrup. You've heard of that ingredient? Well, it's been long associated with fatty liver disease, diabetes, and increases in obesity. But a new study has investigated its effects on the brain. HFCS isn't an inexpensive ingredient, cheap. cheap ingredient added to fast food and fizzy drinks, and is 6 times sweeter than sugar obtained from sugar cane, which is also toxic for you. But this one particular ingredient, the study of UCLA, which is the University of California, Los Angeles, studied the effects of HF, high fructose corn syrup, on rats who have similar brain chemistry to humans. The rats were trained in a maze for 5 days before the experimental diet began. The maze had only one exit and contained visual clues so as to help the rats remember the way through the maze to the exit. The rats were separated into 2 groups, both given high fructose corn syrup solution as drinking water, but one had been fortified with omega-3s. The rats were then tested in the maze 6 weeks after the training period. It was found that the rats that had been given the omega-3s were much better at finding their way through the maze, indicating that they had remembered the way. However, the rats that had been given only high fructose corn syrup had a much reduced ability to find the exit. On closer inspection of the rats' brain tissue, it was found that insulin had little or no effect on brain cells in those from the high fructose corn syrup eating group. The authors of the study suspect that consuming too much high fructose corn syrup could block the ability of insulin to regulate how brain cells store sugar for energy, which requires for processing thoughts. Professor Gomez Pinilla said, quote, "The brain cells had trouble signaling each other, disrupting the rat's ability to think clearly and recall the route they'd learned 6 weeks earlier. We're concerned about high fructose corn syrup that is added to a manufactured food products as a sweetener and preservative. We're not talking about naturally occurring fructose in fruits, which also contains important antioxidants and comes in a fibrous surrounding. The fruit itself has a fiber around it that acts as a time release, much like your little capsules do. The coating on the little drugs that they issue, Big Pharma. But when you take the sugar direct, you're getting it straight like crack cocaine to the body. Protection from high fructose corn syrup by consuming omega-3 seems to be the findings of this research by the UCLA. The omega-3 fatty acid protects the rat's brains from the effects of high fructose corn syrup, meaning a less degraded performance in memory. As rats have a similar brain chemistry to humans, it may be good to practice to consume more omega-3s in our diet. Good natural sources of omega-3s are nuts, seeds, oily fish such as salmon, mackerel, and sardines. Supplements are also available. You can get omega-3s in capsule form. It's in fish oil if you can stand the taste of fish oil. But you get it in also your organic eggs when you don't cook those yolks. High in omega-3s there. A lot of seeds, a lot of nuts. Maybe you should eat up, if you're eating high fructose corn syrup, I recommend some omega-3s to block the effects. You want to make sure that you find the exit out of this maze. The maze we're living in here, called society. You run through it to find your job. You run through it to find your home. You go home at night, lock yourself in your prison cells. It's a rat race. It's a maze. Maybe we should protect our brains with the omega-3. That might help us find the exit. Could be important. We do need to get the hell out of this situation. I'm eating my omega-3s and I feel better. My brain works. It works. Almost to a fault. Yet again, profit is the most important goal, even at the expense of health consumers. At least that's the way Big Pharma looks at it. I don't think profits are worth tricking an entire nation into thinking that their human conditions are actually psychiatric disorders. Disorders that could be cured by medical science with the use of drugs that don't cure but actually mask the effects. And in many cases, as it says right on the label, it causes the very problems that you took the drugs to prevent in the first place. Many of these consumers are, as a result, ending up grossly obese and too mentally impaired to know why their health is suffering. You know, there are so many issues. We run right down the list, article after article here at Breaking Down the News on riverwestradio.com. We're going to jump from drugging up our children in America to the issue of private prisons. Private prisons in America have grown increasingly. You can get stocks on them. You can invest on their success. But is investing in the success of private prisons necessarily a good idea? 1 in every 99 Americans are in jail at the moment. This is a rate higher than Iran, a rate higher than China. We're America. We're supposed to be free. Yet nowadays you can get in jail for any reason. You don't need to break the law anymore. The police might figure out later that they were wrong, they were mistaken, but they made money processing you. Keeps the whole show going. Actually, seems like there isn't much crime out there. Not as much as I would think. There's crime, there is crime. But when I think about it, with as much poverty as there is in this city, it's actually gone down. It's not like we're experiencing a rampage of crime, but the incarceration goes up, mostly for the drug war. You get busted with a bag of pot, you might be doing some jail time, you might be doing some work release. You get caught drunk driving. I'm not saying drunk driving's right. I'm just saying that's where most people here in this town, they play by the rules, they pay their taxes, they don't do drugs, they live upstanding lives, but they drink a little. And every now and then the drinking impairs their judgment. They get in their nice new cars and they get pulled over. The red and blue cherries pop up behind them in their rearview mirror and they think for a second maybe this wasn't a good idea. Happened to a friend of mine recently. Happened to many friends of mine throughout the years. Drunk driving is an issue. Without a doubt, lives are lost. They are. But it is something that if you play by the rules, you got to keep the whole way. You can't just drink and drive and throw your life down the drain. I don't want to see that happen. So let's have discernment out there. Let's not drink and drive. A lot of people like to live in the neighborhood, go to a local establishment, or get a designated driver. You know, I can make that comment now, but actually, when you have a few drinks in you, that's when the decision-making process becomes impaired. A couple of drinks later, you feel like you're going to need more drinks. Pretty soon, you're drunk. You're still functioning drunk, get behind that wheel. But when that police officer pulls you over and determines that you actually do exceed the legal drinking levels, they're going to put you in jail. You're going to do time. You're going to pay a lot of money, and it's going to affect your drinking. You could be drinking that whole time instead of sitting in jail. Think about that next time you get behind the car. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're going to take a break for a moment. I need a break. Been talking since 3:30 p.m. I'm going till 6 o'clock today. It's a long show. I'd like to bring up, while I take a little break here, we've got Thorns and Thistle. This was from the Grassroots Caravan. They came into the show. We interviewed them. They're on their way down to Chicago. And this is a CD compiled by Thistle and Thorns. I believe Celeste is the thorn and Thistle is the thistle. Just in case you were confused, now it's clear. All songs by Thistle Peterson. It's either Pedersen or Peterson. There is 2 T's, so I'm going to say Pedersen. Except Bella Ciao. That's the one song she apparently didn't do on the CD. It's a wonderful CD. It's very politically active. I'm going to start off with track 1 from Thorns and Thistles. I'm Michael Wordsworth. We're going to take a short 10-minute break. We'll be back with more news.
matter, pretend she doesn't care. That hundreds of thousands of millions of tears flow under the bridge over there. She acts as if it doesn't matter, pretends she doesn't care. That her tears flow down, soaking the ground, and she is full to the brim. She is full to the brim. And if she had a garnet, she'd wear it around her neck, attracting and drawing the love she deserves, and avoiding the wreck, avoiding the wreckage, the wreck. But I haven't even practiced my instrument, she says, that refuses to look to the sky. She walks alone at night instead, searching. She is searching. She stumbles on a garden where the plants grow tall, and she's surrounded by people who love her, no matter how small. 'Cause it's the birds and the bees and the butterflies after all. The birds and the bees and the butterflies unite us all. Then she's returning to the land of searching, with a garnet fastened to her neck, and the love up above that always was is shining down, drying the ground, till she finally sees the grass for the trees. planted corn, beans, and squash in the ground at the Capitol. With our pitchforks raised high and torches in the night, we cast our seeds to the ground. And when summer came and the harvest was imminent, we paid no rent at our house. There's no rent at our house, 'cause it's ours. It's ours. The way the angels cry, how it's all gonna ride, a soft lullaby. That's how I'll sing for you. And when the warm winds blow, that's how I'll know you have flown far away from me. And I'll sit by the phone, contemplate a scone, and go on with a drone till the sky is pink and blue. That's how I'll sing for you. That's how I'll sing for
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
I'll sing.
I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News. We're listening to Thorn and Thistle. Beautiful, beautiful work.
For you. British Petroleum, British Petroleum. Do you remember that little ad? Beyond Petroleum. It said beyond, beyond. Now look what's happened. The earth is an open wound, and there is no ocean beyond this one. It makes me kind of woozy, feeling wild like a child caught in an oil storm. No water British Petroleum, beyond petroleum. That's what they said on a billboard and on TV. And what the people saw was a light flickering in a box on a screen. They didn't know it would mean the darkest night they'd ever seen. The color of oil inking our blue skies and watery oceans. I say we slit their throats and watch the blood trickle like oil into all of our water. I say we slit their throats and watch the blood trickle like oil into all of our water. British Petroleum, British Petroleum, and the EPA.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com. Thanks to for-profit prisons, Louisiana has tripled the incarceration rate of Iran. Good afternoon, I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News. This article here by Noel Brinkerhoff from AllGov on May 17th, 2012. Crime is down in Louisiana, but the state still holds the ignominious title of the world's prison capital. An expose by the New Orleans Times Picayune by the New Orleans Times Picayune found that Louisiana incarcerates more people per capita than any other state or country in the world. 1 out of every 86 adults is behind bars, which is nearly the double the U.S. average. This means Louisiana's prison rate is nearly 3 times higher than Iran's, 7 times more than China's, and 10 times that of Germany. For African Americans from New Orleans, 1 in 14 is in prison, and 1 out of 7 is either in prison, on parole, or on probation. Overall, Louisiana's prison population has doubled over the past 20 years. Quote, "The hidden engine behind the state's well-oiled prison machine is cold, hard cash," wrote Cindy Chang at the Times-Picayune. A majority of Louisiana inmates are housed in for-profit facilities, which must be supplied with the constant influx of human beings, or $182 million industry will go bankrupt. This is the problem when we have an entrenched economy. The drug war is the same thing. Once we start making money off of it, we become dependent on it, and the corruption itself becomes institutionalized. Well, for-profit prisons operators include several homegrown companies as well as many of the state's rural sheriffs, especially those in remote parishes like Madison, Avoyelles, East Carroll, and Concordia. Quote, "A good portion of Louisiana law enforcement is financed with dollars legally skimmed off the top of prison operations." That's a report by Chang. In the Senate Republican news, the U.S. Senate Republicans block new Iran sanctions bill. This from Reuters. U.S. Senator Republicans said on Thursday they needed more time to examine a revised package of new economic sanctions on Iran's oil sector. On Thursday, a surprise move that drew anger from Senate Democrats, who had expected a unanimous Senate vote of approval ahead of Iran talks on May 23rd. Quoted by Democratic leader Harry Reid, said on the Senate floor after the Republican objection, quote, "I feel I've been jerked around." Well, Senator Reid, we're all being jerked around, and you're one of the guys jerking us. But still, here we go. I mean, at least on the upfront, Republicans are saying they don't approve of this. That would be good sense. I don't recommend it. We're trying the sanctions on Iran. We're doing it because they allegedly have a nuclear weapon that they don't. They don't have the nuclear weapon, not just because I say so. It's because the AEIA, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the CIA's own reports have concluded that Iran is years away from obtaining a weapon. They use a thorium-based plutonium in their reactors, which is not able to be weaponized, and yet the media still puts out that there's even a legitimacy for debate. By Senator Reid saying, we're not going to do it, he's not saying that there's no reason for us to even have a issue with Iran in the first place. He's just debating what the Democrats want. They want sanctions. Appears this year the Democrats are out for blood. Your typical liberal, egg-headed, left-wing Democrat doesn't seem to be the run-of-the-mill Democrat today. Many people in the party are divided. Many people nowadays don't believe in Republican or Democratic parties. They don't feel that they're being represented, that their leaders don't present the actual issues, that both sides are the same side, and it's tearing down America. But Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said his staff did not receive a draft of the bill until late on Wednesday night and needed more time to review it. He quotes, "There is no reason in the world why we can't resolve whatever differences we have and move forward. We certainly don't want to take a step backward." What would that be, Senator? And there are members on my side of the aisle who are concerned that the way the measure is currently crafted could actually be a step in the wrong direction. Well, I think so. I think we shouldn't even be discussing this. There's no right direction at the moment when it comes to Iran. I'm telling you, the people in Iran, they're like us. They want to live like us. The rest of the world wanted to live like us. We could have taken over the world culturally had we, after 1947, after World War II, just held to our values and stuck to our ground. Had we remained a savings nation and not a debtor nation, had we not imploded the housing market by listening to Alan Greenspan and his bubble-driven economies, suckers, bubble after bubble. We took a toll, took a dive. Some made money, some lost it. But it's a bubble-driven economy, which means it's got to pop at some time. Derivatives are another bubble. The derivative debts held by Bank of America alone are estimated by the New York Times to be $76 trillion in unexposed liabilities. $76 trillion, for those of you that don't understand, our current nation debt is $15 trillion. An entire nation with the production capacity, the GDP being $13 trillion a year as an entire nation, somehow Bank of America has more power and more money than we do. They've been able to ring up a debt of $76 trillion in derivative fraud as exposed by the media, even mainstream media. What are they going to do when the economy collapses and you realize that you can't take the taxes and fines? Well, they're going to move to instigate a Nazi-style takeover. A Soviet-style America. America with the K. And it's going to happen here because we didn't wake up fast enough and realize it. We're too busy with their iPads, Coca-Cola, television sets, and booze to stop for a second and realize that we're being, for the lack of a better word, screwed. Nailed to the cross unnecessarily for reasons that only it's not... Oh, wait. Do we got a caller here? No, again, it's the video store, and hey, it would be nice to get a call in today. If you really want to call in and you agree or disagree, the number to call is 414-935-2951. I'm Michael Wordsworth. This is Breaking Down the News. We're covering a lot of issues. I was just talking about what's going to happen when America does realize, and they're not going to realize it. The majority of Americans are not going to realize this takeover has been real. It's been going on behind the scenes, that the reason for all these new bills that allow us to be tortured or put in prisons indefinitely without trial or jury, this is all a move to make the American people dissidents, political dissidents when they disagree. They're no longer constituents with elected representational leaders. They are now government insurgents. People that do not agree with the status quo that says, screw us, let's take it down, let's bring America to its knees, let's gut it out and let it rot for the vultures. No, when you go to complain, you're going to be encountered by H.R. 347, the bill that says you can't protest. Your First Amendment rights are gone. If you join the military to go fight the cause, you're going to return and find out that your death benefits have been taken away and that you've been declared the newest threat, disgruntled veterans. If you have PTSD, you're going to lose your Second Amendment rights. The right to own and possess arms. Not a debatable issue. There was one reason and one reason only that bill was of rights was put in place there, the Second Amendment. And that was to have a well-armed populace in the event of tyranny. A lot of people today think, especially on the liberal side, not saying that the conservatives are right, but the conservatives seem to see better this slow takeover only because of Barack Obama is behind the steering wheel of the office. Actually, he's not. He's sitting behind a steering wheel that doesn't work. It's like one of those cars they teach you to drive in. President Obama appears to be driving and steering the nation, but that wheel doesn't actually turn anything. He's actually just a teleprompter reading stooge, just like George Bush before him. And both have one thing in common. They hate Americans, they're communists, and they want to bring the country down. Well, some of us are fighting back. A federal judge Wednesday issued an injunction against the National Defense Authorization Act provision that grants the military right to detain anyone it suspects of involvement in terrorism. Terrorism, again, being, should you have a grievance to address the government, you're now a terrorist. You don't like it? That's okay. They got the guns. They got the SWAT teams. You get the little black hood in the middle of the night. They come in with the secret police, and when they're hauling you away, they tell your friends and family, if you say anything, we're going to be back for you next. You don't think that's terrifying? You're going to find out. But this U.S. District Judge Catherine Forrest ruled in favor of a group of plaintiffs, including Truth Day columnist Chris Hedges, who filed a lawsuit against the legislation within weeks of President Obama signing it. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it. That's very American of you. And I mean that sincerely. Sometimes I sound sarcastic. No, I actually mean it. Thank you, Chris, for filing a lawsuit against this legislation. Chris Hedges, was joined in the suit by linguist, author, and dissident Noam Chomsky. Pentagon whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg and other high-profile activists, scholars, and politicians. Thank you, guys. I'm not a big fan of Noam Chomsky. He's got his left bent wing that leads us to socialism, but still many people are fans of him, and I can tell you this, he writes a mean essay. Military detention law blocked by New York judge. This by Van Voris and Patricia Hurtado from Bloomberg on May 16, 2012. They report that a federal judge temporarily blocked enforcement of part of the National Defense Authorization Act that opponents claim could subject them to indefinite military detention for activities including news reporting and political activism. My God, as a radio news talk show host, this is concerning to me, except I'm so insignificant, it really doesn't matter. Let's keep in mind that Adolf Hitler let all the political parties disagree, and the equivalent of a radio talk show host back in that day, they were allowed to speak out against the government. Why? So that Hitler could say, no, I'm not slowly moving to take over the country. There won't be totalitarianism soon. Look, these people are able to speak out against me. Well, there came a time right down to the wire before the Nazi Party, the Nationalist Socialist Party of Germany, took over. Hitler became the leader of this party, and the people were hauled away. News reporters, intellectuals, artists, poets, they're all the way, and history looks like it's going to repeat itself again. I mean, the indefinite military detention for activities including news reporting and political activism, that's the end of America. Listen, that is the end of America. No need on the 4th of July to wave that flag. You don't know what you're talking about. You just might as well shred that flag, shred the Constitution. It's over. It's over if we don't do something. And like I say, you can do something just by not believing the lie. When other people are standing around talking about, oh yeah, if they're even talking about it, all you got to say is, I don't buy that. I'm not going to believe it. I'm going to hold to the Constitution. If you don't know what the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the manner that they protect you, it's a good time to learn. There's a lot of articles online. There's a lot of people speaking out. And some of the people speaking out, they're losing their lives or being imprisoned. Andrew Breitbart, he was killed. Killed because he was going to bring to light that Obama has actually participated in the 1970s in the Weather Underground. A known card-carrying, confirmed socialist, communist character that approved of using aggression to take over the United States. Why isn't he arrested? Well, Andrew Breitbart was going to come out with the video, and he, in his ignorance, made this announcement before coming out with the video. Some of us saw parts of it or heard parts of it. It's alarming. It would have brought Obama down, which would have been a good thing. Many people, I tell you, I agree with the Republicans on this issue, that if we get Obama in the White House again, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in big trouble. May it even be the Civil War that the Department of Homeland Security is preparing for, buying all this ammo. U.S. District Judge Catherine Forrest in Manhattan today ruled in favor of a group of writers and activists who sued President Barack Obama. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and the Defense Department, claiming a provision of the act signed into law December 31st, puts them in fear that they could be arrested and held by the U.S. Armed Forces. The complaint was filed January 13th by a group including former New York Times reporter Christopher Hedges. The plaintiffs contend a section of the law allows for detention of citizens and permanent residents taken into custody in the U.S. on, quote, suspicion of providing substantial support, end quote, to supported engaged in hostilities against the U.S., such as Al-Qaeda. You're aiding Al-Qaeda if you report the actual news. Here's another quote. The statute at issue places the public at undue risk, having their speech chilled for the purported protection from Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and associated forces. Ooh, sounds evil. Sounds terrible. Can they take away our rights and liberties? No. Can you by remaining asleep and inactive? Yes. Yes, you can. Forrest said in an opinion today, quote, the vagueness of Section 1021 does not allow the average citizen or even the government itself to understand what the type of definitiveness to which our citizens are entitled or what conduct comes within that scope. It's amazing, but it's not the only news out there. I'm here reading the news, the headlines that you should have been on the front pages and weren't. The headlines that collectively spell out an end to America if we don't wake up and do something. Wake up, America. I'm Michael Wordsworth.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
Good afternoon, I'm Michael Wordsworth, breaking down the news on this Friday edition. At RiverWestRadio.com, I'd like to take us now over to Arizona. Arizona has suffered a lot over the last years. The issues are big. I don't even want to get into all of them right now, but I'd like to get into this article that Arizona Secretary of State threatens to remove Obama from the ballot. And why? Let's find out. This article source comes from Keith Koffler, WhiteHouseDossier.com, on May 18th, 2012. He reports that Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett is threatening to keep President Obama's name off the state's ballot in November unless he receives confirmation from Hawaii that it has a valid birth certificate on file for him. Bennett, who spoke to the Arizona radio host Mike Broomhead Thursday, said he requested the confirmation 8 weeks ago and has gotten it. Hawaii, he said, does not have to supply a certified copy of the birth certificate, merely send him an email confirming that it has one. Asked by Broomhead if he would remove Obama's name from the ballot if Hawaii fails to comply, Bennett said that is possible. Or the other option would be that I would ask all the candidates, including the president, to submit a certified copy of their birth certificate. I don't know if you followed the issue with Barack Obama's birth certificate. I think every American's heard about that one. It's in question. Some care, some don't. Some don't see the point of why it would matter. It matters because you have to be born a U.S. citizen to become president. It would do no good. It's like Napoleon or something. It's just like... oh, my word. It's important that you are born in America if you want to be the American president. It doesn't matter what race or creed you are. I mean, look at Romney. Big Mormon supporter. Just like JFK at his time. They were afraid of the Catholics getting into office. Well, that the Vatican would be controlling things. I'm not saying that's the issue with Romney. Actually, I'm going to do a show just on Romney. For those mainline Republicans, what they call the rhinos, Republicans in name only, they need to know what the leading candidate is all about. He wrote Obamacare. He's no good, America. I'd like to tell you who the man is for the job, but maybe it's my place, maybe it's not. I'm voting for Ron Paul. You can call that crazy, but if you don't, you're stupid. On to this article, 40 Fed agencies man secret command center outside Chicago. This from Infowars.com, bringing you the news that the Chicago cops, the FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, and a large number of unnamed others have established a high-tech secret command center to surveil people exercising their Fourth Amendment right in Chicago as the NATO War Council unfolds this weekend. The Associated Press seems to be anticipating another police riot like the one in Chicago during the 1968 Democratic Convention. During that police-instigated riot, Mayor Richard Daley's police beat up journalists, including Mike Wallace and Dan Rather. Chicago's current mayor, former Obama chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, the evil dark cloaked one, has not so far attacked journalists, although his cops are inclined to handcuff them for covering the news. What can we expect this weekend in Chicago? It's hard to say, but we can say that face masks, snipers, and aerial surveillance, Chicago's newest anti-protest measures, have been revealed. This article by Yana Kunichov from Truth Out Report. Each time a new measure that the city of Chicago is preparing for the coming NATO and G8 summits is unveiled, the tension in the city ratchets up a notch. The latest news comes in the form of reports that Chicago has purchased face shields and may consider the implementation of airborne surveillance technology. I mean, how is airborne surveillance technology going to stop any disruptions or the I do not understand. You know, they're called helicopters. They're hovering over Chicago all the time. There's police helicopters. Do you really need low-altitude unmanned drones surveilling what would basically be a scene of thousands of people in the streets? Well, you can only wonder. As part of the expanded powers given to Mayor Rahm, Mayor Rahm Emanuel for the May summits. The city has authority to accept contracts for goods or services without approval of the city council or the expected competitive bidding process. The face shields and area surveillance technology are the first use of this allowance. Chicago police officers and any law enforcement the city chooses to deputize under the measures put in place for NATO's G8 will be equipped with 3,000 new face shields that will fit easily over the gas mask. Gas mask, this is according to the Chicago Sun-Times. What the heck do they think will be going on down there? Absolutely amazing. This weekend, it's hard to tell. I can't wait to get back Monday and Wednesday and fill this in. We're going to have some answers. The nearly $200,000 contract with Super Seer, a Colorado-based company, was made as an emergency purchase for the G8 Summit, according to Super Seer President Steve Smith. Well, thank you, Steve. Thanks for helping ending America while making a little profit. Chicago has also reported that Chicago will get the latest in aerial surveillance equipment. Oh, thank God. That's what our tax dollars need to go for. God forbid it should be to build a company that would give you a job. Remember the bailouts of GM, Chrysler, and all these guys? Detroit suffering horribly. Well, they spent billions to move the company to Brazil. I mean, I wish Americans would get off about that. The airborne units will transmit to 4 strategically located ground-based receiver sites, providing citywide coverage and the ability to simultaneously receive real-time images from 2 aircraft for viewing at the Office of Emergency. Real-time images. Could you imagine the quality of real-time images? 1,000 feet up, at least, of thousands of people on the ground. It's reported that some of these drones, it's true that they can read your text on your telephone. I mean, that is good, but the question is, why do we need them? An additional 3 receive systems will be installed in the city's mobile command vehicles to facilitate field operations. Oh my goodness. It is very important that we spend all this money to make sure that Americans no longer have the right to protest. How American? When did we become communists? When did this happen? These measures will be in addition to, quote, snipers that will stand guard from above, as reported by ABC, overarching security jurisdiction for the summits, which have been designated a national security threat, has already been handed over to the Secret Service. Well, if it's under the Secret Service, that means it's covered under H.R. 347, and I guess you can't protest there. This will be interesting. I'm Michael Wordsworth. Back in a minute.
You're listening to RiverWestRadio.com.
A 3-year-old is in the care of the CPS, overprescribed by psychotropic drugs. Indeed. This report from Houston's Fox 26. 4-year-old Rachel Harrison, before Child Protective Services took her away from her parents. Once CPS takes over, you can see the drastic changes for yourself. Quote, and as a parent, it's very hard to deal with because your baby's in trouble and you can't do anything to help, said Rachel's mother, Christina Harrison. Watch as the bubbly little girl starts looking more like some neglected waif under care of CPS, Child Protective Services. I should say Child Pedophile Services, because you're more than 5 times likely to be molested under the care of CPS than you are in your own home. I would hope so. I would think that no parent would ever molest their children. It happens very rarely. But when you get a few bruises on your child's arm because they were playing on the playground and the CPS gets in it, without judge or jury, they can take your child away. It's done by color of law. There's no real authority these courts possess. The real authority and the real law that comes from these courts comes from the Constitution of the United States, is granted by constitutions from state and federal levels. It says that you must first be proven guilty before you can be incarcerated, but not in America. We somehow thought that the whole process could be subverted in the case of child protection. We become brainwashed. brainwashed to serve this system when you think that your child can be taken away. If you're shoplifting, they have to prove it. The TSA workers go down your pants at the airports. Police officers can't do that without due cause. I mean, they have to have a reason. They can't just come up there and start feeling you up, but the TSA can get away with it. Well, under this care of the CPS, some other quotes, she was never neglected or abused in any other way except by the CPS, the Child Pedophile Services, said Debbie Flores, Rachel's grandmother. In numerous court hearings, CPS caseworkers would admit they had no reason to think Rachel's parents ever neglected or abused her. The only reason CPS took custody was the young parents' recreational drug use, something they admit to and live to regret. But ironically, Rachel would be the one hooked on drugs while under CPS watchdog, including Risperdal, a drug used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, according to the FDA, should not be given to a child under 10. 3 years old, given psychotropic drugs? I don't care if her parents were doing drugs or not. I don't care if they were smoking crack cocaine on the lawn. That's no reason to take a 3-year-old girl and give her psychotropic drugs just so Big Pharma can make money and maybe the stock investors can get a little pay raise. There's no reason, none at all. Rachel's father said he agrees. There was no reason for them to do it. It was 2007 when CPS first entered the family's life. The state agency took Rachel into protective custody soon after her birth because her mother tested positive for marijuana. Another name for that's pot, weed, dank, nugs. Marijuana is the pejorative term given to white middle America back in the 50s. They said that marijuana was the great danger. Why? Because Mexicans brought it up from the border. Well, back then the prejudice against the Latino community was strong. Back in the 50s, the prejudice against African Americans was harsh. They said that the marijuana would cause white women to breed with Negroes. It would cause them to listen to the evil satanic jazz, blues, and rock and roll that contained a beat, made your foot stomp. That's the truth behind marijuana. The older generations bought and believed it. They were scared to death that their white women would become impregnated by Negroes. And God forbid that they should allow their children to smoke marijuana. There's many other reasons why marijuana was made illegal in this country, but that's not what I'm covering in this article. I got to take on one injustice at a time. There's a case where the 2007 home video showed a horrific case of diaper rash that Rachel had while in foster care. Rachel being the little girl taken by CPS, the 3-year-old girl now. The baby's awful condition is pointed out to 2 CPS case workers, but neither decides to seek medical attention. They weren't being cared for in the care of the Child Protective Services. Even after a judge ordered the foster mom to get Rachel to a doctor ASAP, CPS failed to make sure that happened. CPS doesn't have to even obey the orders of a judge. They themselves work under the color of law, fake laws that only work because people acquiesce to the belief that they have authority. But here, an actual judge, an actual member of our law enforcement and justice system says, get the kid to the doctor ASAP. That wasn't good enough for CPS. Later, CPS admitted to making big mistakes, but so what? Fast forward to July 2010, quote, I went to the hospital to get my appendix out and tested positive for cocaine, Rachel's mother said. That was enough for CPS to take Rachel again and spend over a year trying to determine David and Christina's parental rights. You declare an illegal drug war on the nation. Some people that use drugs have children. It's real big. Heroin use is real popular amongst nice white class, middle class people with jobs. Seems to be hitting them at an epidemic level. They have the money to buy it. They do it. Make a mistake though. As soon as you do, you can get your children taken away. Like I said, I don't care if this family was smoking crack on the lawn. There is no reason for CPS to take the child and drug the child up. The hypocrisy is evident. CPS wouldn't allow the family to see Rachel for 2 months. What they say they saw was a drooling, lethargic, emaciated-looking little girl who wanted to play a very strange game. Quote, she was also writing prescriptions. Rachel is not normal, her mother said. They might play doctor, but she was writing prescriptions on paper. Here, take your medicine, was the quote. The family, again, can we not see the hypocrisy? This child, 3-year-old girl, is now drugged up. The family spent months asking CPS if Rachel was on drugs. Oh, you put the kid on drugs. It's amazing. David Harrison said CPS's own policy dictates parents must be told within 24 hours about their child needing or receiving medical treatment. But these parents didn't know for 6 months until it finally came out in a court hearing. You're completely powerless, said Rachel's mother. You're powerless against these people. They hold all the cards and do whatever they want, said Rachel's father. After the judge started questioning CPS about the little girl's declining condition, CPS gave up trying to terminate the couple's parental rights and gave them their daughter back. According to court testimony, Dr. Owen Osagi is a psychiatrist who prescribed psychotropic drugs to the then 3-year-old girl. Thank you, Dr. Owen Osagi, spelled O-S-A-G-I-E, the psychiatrist who drugged up this 3-year-old. He testified he had seen Rachel for approximately 15 minutes, and that's all it took for him to diagnose. Well, I'm Michael Wordsworth. The news doesn't stop. It won't stop next Monday. We're going to cover the G8 Summit. It's going to be a long weekend here, and for some, those of you going down to the Chicago event, be careful out there. Again, I'm Michael Wordsworth. Thank you for listening.
It doesn't mean stop. It means